Okay, hello, good afternoon, everyone. So, first of all, thanks for introducing me. Today's topic, like he said, will be focused on discussions in classroom management. It's pretty simple, a lot of it. I know some of you maybe experienced TAs or experienced teachers even. Hopefully, there's something for people of all abilities in this workshop. Something I'll say too is I'll be expecting you to do a little bit of activities, a little bit of collaboration. So keep eating, enjoy your food, but also we will have some discussions later on. So you might need to move if you're not sitting near any other people. Okay? All right, cool. We'll get started. Yeah. So my name is Henry. I work here at NTUST as part of the Fulbright program. I help students like you with any kind of English needs that you have. So if anyone's taking TOEIC, TOEFL, IELTS, anything like that, we help people at our office with that. If anyone wants to do general English conversation, we also chat with students. If people are taking EMI classes, like I'm sure a lot of you are, we also help students with that. So I'll put more of my information at the end of this presentation, but if you're interested in any of that, we do one-on-one work as well as more workshops like this. So I'll put that information at the end. You're welcome to join us. Okay, and as for my personal story, I'm from the United States. I've been living in Taiwan for like 4 years now. And yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you. Okay, so for today, we'll look at what is classroom management very basically, just the absolute basics of that. We'll look at a few different tools that you can use very easily to manage your classes more effectively. And then we'll look at a little bit of discussion. So using those tools and using good question making, how can we create good discussions in the classroom? It sounds easy, but actually, I mean, it is easy, but if you just follow these steps that aren't so obvious, it's pretty doable, I will say. Okay, so we'll talk about classroom management. Just to make sure everyone's listening. Can I have someone help me to read this, please? I'll give you $1 million. Anybody? One person. Okay, yes. Okay, can we clap for him? Thank you. Yes, so this is more of an in-depth answer. I highlighted the key words, so structured, orderly, and productive. If your classes are not those three things, it doesn't matter how good your material is, your students are not going to be listening, okay? To simplify this, the most basic idea is that you want to make your class run efficiently. You don't want your students to be worried about where they should sit, or can they raise their hand, or do I have to have this discussion? You don't want them thinking about the actual little details of the class. You want them focused completely on what the material is, okay? And if you have effective classroom management, that's how it's going to be. They won't be worried about all of the other things. I do see a lot of classes as a student, like when I was a student, as well as at NTUST and any other university, where your professors are obviously experts in their field, very knowledgeable, the material is very relevant, but the students are just completely disengaged. They're not listening, they're not engaged. And it could be for a lot of reasons. Classroom management comes down to a lot of things. It could be as simple as allowing cell phones in the classroom. You know, a lot of students will be on their phones. But it could also be things like if a student doesn't feel like their participation is rewarded or wanted, then they won't participate. So that's why I think it's important, especially as TAs. You know, maybe we might be more, depending on your professor, more technologically literate. And also, too, if you're a professor, it's important to learn how to use these new technologies because all of that makes a big difference. So, yeah. Typically, in the past, some ways that classroom management has been done is by giving things like a reward or a punishment. Punishment less often at the college setting, but sometimes it does happen. But like, for example, if a student raises their hand and speaks 3 times in a class, maybe they'll get extra credit. That might be a more college level one. Or for kids, maybe you get a piece of candy. Similarly, if students are not engaged, not talking, maybe there'd be some kind of punishment, whether that be credit or kicking them out of class, things like that. That's a more old school approach. Also stuff like time limits for discussions, time limits for all kinds of in-class activities. And lastly, too, I will say that classroom management traditionally is a lot more teacher-centered. So the teacher is talking, the entire time, and the students are listening the entire time and receiving the information. A lot of the stuff that I'll talk about today is more student-centered. Not that any of this is bad, by the way, but a lot of what I'll talk about is more student-centered, which in some cases can increase participation, I would say, and maybe make students more invested. So this is a more traditional way. The idea is reducing friction. That's the whole goal. So friction is any kind of, like I was saying before, it's any kind of conflict with just engaging with the content. If a student is ever thinking about something else, that's friction. Yeah. Okay. So the three tools that we'll look at are Mentimeter, Google Forms, and then a very basic teaching strategy called Think, Pair, Share. I think to some extent, we've probably all done these three before. At least Google Forms and Think, Pair, Share. I think these have definitely been done before. Mentimeter is also pretty common now, but yeah, if you haven't used it, we'll explain it. Yeah, I use all of these in my workshop. So let me just get right into it. So firstly, we'll look at Mentimeter. Can I just see a raise of hands? Has anyone used Mentimeter before? Like as a student or a teacher? I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, not a lot of you. Okay, that's perfect. We can talk about it. So Mentimeter is kind of like Kahoot, if anybody's tried that. Basically, it's like a real-time student interaction tool. So the teacher will put the information up on the screen. They'll put a QR code or a link. The students will join. And then as the students are answering questions in the class, the answers and the results will be shown on the screen. It's actually a really powerful tool. It's anonymous is one strength of it. So if you want to ask questions that maybe students would be more nervous to answer. For example, if a student is worried about being wrong, okay, and they're doing a Mentimeter, that won't be a concern because right or wrong, nobody knows who you are. And it's really useful to the teacher too because they can see who's confused. If I asked a question to the class and I expected you to raise your hand, if you weren't 100% confident, maybe you wouldn't raise your hand because you don't want to be wrong. But with Mentimeter, that's not an issue, so it's very useful. It's really easy to see and collect the data with Mentimeter. So actually during the answer process, you can do that. And also at the end, you have all of the data there together. So it's a really powerful tool. You can also ask multiple question types. I'm going to show you here in a second. We'll actually do one together. But the amount of questions that you can use with this are like endless. It's really cool. And some of them are fun. You can even put like games. You can do multiple choice. You can do short answer. You can do ranking systems. It's really, really useful, honestly. Some of them I don't know when you would use, but you never know. And lastly, I did mention Think, Pair, Share. I won't get into that now, but this tool can actually be combined with that. So you can actually use this for students to collaborate with each other as well, not just individual answering the teacher. So yeah, it's great. All right, I'm gonna have us do one. So everybody, I assume you have a phone. I hope you have a phone. You can scan this to join. If we have more than 50 people, you might not be able to join. I think there's not 50 people in here right now, so it should be fine. But yeah, you can scan to join that. I'll wait just a minute for people to join. Okay, if you haven't joined yet, that's the same QR code. Oh, okay, 41 people are in. Okay, cool. 42, anybody else? I see a couple more people joining. Like I said, unfortunately, the maximum is 50. So if you're after 50, you can just watch. Sorry about that. Okay, that's 50. If you weren't able to join, I'm sorry. Maybe you can look at one of your classmates' phones. Okay, cool. So yeah, very simply, there's a lot of different tools. So this is one type of question. When I was an elementary school teacher, I would always ask my kids this. They loved it so much. But for example, you can put an image on the screen and have students point to it. So this obviously is more like a fun one, but I've seen people too like put a graph or a chart and say like, where can you find this information in the chart? And the students can tap. So you all can practice this. Just tap how you're feeling today. Also, it's cool, you can see how many people have participated so far. So for example, in this case, there's 52 participants and 23 have answered this question. I'll wait for a few more people. I see a lot of people are number 6. I don't know what that means, but it's good. Okay, cool. Yeah, so again, this has a lot of applications. I've seen too, like people will even put a map and have students pick a spot on the map, maybe based on where they're from, something like that. So yeah, it's cool. Okay, this one is a short answer. So you can write a few words. I'll wait until I see a few answers. Yeah. If you haven't learned anything, that's okay. You can write that too. Okay, a reward of participation. Sure. To explain this question a bit, this one would be, yeah, don't be late. Okay, I see you. This one would be like pretty casual. There's a longer form question system as well. This one is just looking for short answers. Cat is liquid. I don't know what that means, but sure. Spanish culture, true. 3 tools, yes. The culture in Mexico, okay, bet. I'll tell you one thing too. So one of the problems of Mentimeter is because it's anonymous and because it's presented to the whole class, sometimes people will put very unique answers, okay, that aren't necessarily related to the class. So you do have to be careful of that. That is a real problem. But yeah, okay, 3 tools, I'm not sure, Mentimeter, yeah. So as you can see, the teacher can see all of this. And what's cool too is you can actually group the responses together. So like that, yeah. It's interesting. And the teacher can take this and interpret it later on once the class is over. So cool. Yeah, this one. Oh yeah, this one is interesting too. So this one you can have one word students respond with. So for example, if you do a Mentimeter at the end of class, you could be like, how did you feel about the class today? Too busy, yeah. Tiring, okay. And the more common that word is used, the bigger it will be. Again, you have to be careful. Sometimes people will put crazy things like drunk, okay? That's good. All right, we'll move on. It doesn't seem like a good semester. Okay, yeah. So here's another one. I only have one question for this, but this is like a quiz. So this one is kind of fun because you can make it like a competition with students. I'll wait for a few more people to join and then we'll try it. I've also seen teachers have prizes for this because you can write your name. You can optionally make this not anonymous. If you're worried about what students are writing, you can do that too. I'll wait for a couple more people to join. Okay, this is a really easy question. Hopefully. Actually, I don't think I talked about this, so maybe you can guess, if not. So when is classroom management necessary? Again, these are all easy questions, but you can make these as easy or hard as you want. Okay, let's see. Yeah, exactly, throughout the class. Good answer. For those of you that said, huh, I can relate. All right, cool. And lastly, you can have graphs and charts. These are all sort of the same. It ultimately comes up to your preference and the preference of your students. You can mess with this, you can test it out and see what's most effective for you. I tried to put like every kind of question that Mentimeter has in this. Yeah, so you can easily see. And yeah, just a very quick way to see students' understanding. I really love using Mentimeter a lot. Okay, and then lastly, you can do like a Q&A. So if this is at the end of the class, you might include something like this. I oftentimes will put a Mentimeter in the middle of a workshop or in the middle of a class because actually the results that you get from this can inform what you're doing later on, right? It can you can build the rest of your class off of that or know what you need to reinforce for next time maybe. So all very useful. Okay, cool. So yeah, thank you. It looks like that. All right, let's continue. So Mentimeter has some strengths and some weaknesses. Like I said, students can kind of write like whatever they want, and it can be a little bit unprofessional. That can be an issue. One time I taught at a university in Shinju, and it was like a freshman kind of seminar class, and I had to turn it off after like 2 seconds because they were just writing the most terrible things. But typically, I think in a college setting, that'll be fine. Also, too, another issue is that you need to make sure your students have technology. You know, most students, I would say, have access to a cell phone, but you never know. You can never know 100%. And also, too, if you're TAing an online class, that might be more difficult. For example, if the students are joining from their phones, they might not be able to join the Mentimeter. So those are a few concerns. But again, I think that just because of how easy it is to see the data, how easy it is to save the results, it's a really great tool. Okay, so that's our first one. The second one that I want to look at is Google Forms. I suspect that you've all, can I just see who has done a Google Form before? Probably everyone. Yeah, okay. So Google Forms are not fun. Actually, they're super boring. But they're actually really, really pretty useful, I would say, especially for TAs to put at the end of a class. So I use this as kind of an exit ticket. I don't know if any of you have heard that term before, but an exit ticket is basically something you do at the end of a class to, it's a requirement before you leave. So this is really useful. It can be useful for students and teachers. For teachers, you're getting information from your students. You're seeing what they understand, what they don't understand. For students, it's like a bit of review. So everything that they've learned during that class, during that day, they can review. And what's interesting about Google Forms is you can have it send a copy back to that student. So if you build your exit ticket in a way with questions and answers that are clear and easy to follow, the student can kind of study with that as well, or remember exactly what they learned in that class. It's also easy to use. Everyone's done it. You just type in your answer or click your answer. It's very easy. There's a lot of question types similar to Mentimeter, and I'll show that off a little bit. You have a lot of variety. I see a lot of people use Google Forms kind of not in the best way. They just use like the same question 20 times. You can put some variety and it will be actually pretty powerful, I would say. And also too, not a lot of people know this. You can see all the data at once, and I'll show you how to do that. But yeah, let me just show you now actually. So I have a few examples here. This is a Google form that I actually used before. So for example, we have multiple choice, pick one, short answer, and then like a 1 or 2 choice. So what I want to show you really is I have all the responses here, which this one, if you've ever made a Google form, I'm sure you know about. You can scroll through and see the answers, all of them. You can also see individually who answered what. This one is anonymous, I think, so I can't do that. But oh yeah, here, individual. So you can see based on each student what they answered. What's really cool about this though is if you click here, view in sheets, you can see all of the data all together. This example didn't really have a lot of, I don't want to show anybody's personal information. This one didn't really have a lot of questions, but you can sort. So for example, if I was looking for international students out of this group, I could sort like this and see all the international students immediately. If I wanted to sort by college, I could do that as well. And so rather than looking through all the data, you have it all right here. And every single Google form has this. So it's actually really useful. I have a few other examples, but this is the one that we'll actually do later. We're not going to do this right now. But you can do short answer. You can do multiple choice. You can have like a 1 to 5 ranking system. So it's really deep. It's really powerful. Yeah. As for strengths and weaknesses, like I said, it is legitimately very boring for students to do. So I do recommend that you not make it too long. Try not to cram a million questions into a Google form, especially if you actually want students to do it. But another weakness would be you do sometimes have to manually go through them. But again, using Google Sheets can make that easier. So yeah. Yeah, that's a Google form. I really recommend you use that, honestly. It doesn't take long to make, and it's a record that you'll always have. It'll just be in your Google Drive. So really recommend it. And I'm going to make you guys do a couple later. I'm sorry. For the same reason. Okay, cool. So I've been talking a lot. We'll practice a few of these now. So the last tool I want to share with you is called Think, Pair, Share. If any of you have taught before, you definitely have seen this. And if all of us are students, so I think too, we've done this in class a lot. This is a very, very powerful tool for collaboration, okay? You use it to hear from individual students, you use it to hear from groups, and then you use it to get an idea of what everybody in the whole class is thinking. I love this because if you have a class and you're asking questions, either you get no one raises their hand, which in Taiwan I think is more common, or you get the same 3 or 4 students raising their hand every single time. So that's always a problem. And it's always difficult to hear from the students that might be a little more shy to speak. With Think, Pair, Share, it's a lot easier to build confidence, and it's a lot easier to increase engagement because the stakes are lower. It's no risk. You're just talking to one person and then a little bit bigger group and then finally the bigger group. So it feels more natural, I think, for students. It's very easy to understand. A good Think, Pair, Share question is pretty clear, pretty simple for students to follow. They can just do it. And again, you can also do multiple question types. So if you're a TA in an engineering class, you can use this for mathematics as well. You can use it for language class. You can use it for any kind of class. So yeah. Just to demonstrate it, a few of the strengths. You start, like I said, with the individual. You have the individual take usually not too long, 30 seconds, 1 minute to think for themselves. Depending on how difficult or easy the question is, you can change that time as well. Then they talk in a small group. Today I'll have you talk in groups of no more than 2 or 3, hopefully, maybe 4 if you're just 4 people sitting together. And then lastly, they share with the whole class. So again, the progression is very natural. And as for why you give them time to think, in the past, I've seen this happen where you do a Think, Pair, Share, and you just don't give them time to think. You say, okay, talk with your partner, go. And so for about 30 seconds, both of the people in the group are like, they're thinking anyway, okay? So I find it's easier, I find it's better to just give them a little bit of time to think right at the start, okay? And then they can more naturally go in. They're prepared for the conversation after that. So we will practice it. Our first question is pretty easy, just review. So like I said, try to talk to at least one other person, up to 3 or 4, okay? So the first question is, how could a teacher or TA use Mentimeter in the classroom, and what are 2 of its strengths? This is really easy, this is just review. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna give you about 30 seconds to think, and then I'll give you 3 minutes to talk, okay? Okay. It's an awkward silence. All right, so find 2 or 3 people, and you can talk about it now. Kahoot? Yeah, Kahoot. Yeah, true. I feel like Kahoot is more like gamey, I would say. But sometimes that's more fun, low-key, so yeah, true. Yeah, and like, I don't know, depending on the class, it can be like too gamey, you know? Okay, so I know some of you are not finished talking. Some of you finished talking like 3 minutes ago. Either way, that's okay. That's okay. Okay, so I heard a lot of interesting points. Before I call on anybody, does anybody want to share what they talked about with their partner? You want to share? Okay, I can give you the microphone. 100% way easier. Okay, can we clap for her? Thank you. Okay, first of all, I think you should be teaching this workshop instead of me. But yeah, I think you said 2 very important things. If you're an introverted student, just because you're extroverted and willing to raise your hand, we do want to hear what you have to say, but so often it's like the students with the best ideas just are silent the whole time, so that's very useful. And yeah, it just shows you right away exactly what your students are thinking, so it's great. Okay, can I have one more person share before we move on? Okay, yes, I mentioned this a little bit, but I just want to say it again. That's such a good point. If you use any of these tools at the beginning, the middle, or the end of your class, it can look completely different and you can get totally different information. So they're all very, depending on what you need, depending on what your TA situation is like, you might change that up. Okay, we're going to do one more question and then we'll move on from this. This one's a little more philosophical, okay? If you were a successful TA, what would that mean for you, your teacher, aka the professor that you work with, and your students? So if you were a successful TA, what would that look like? I'm going to give you 30 seconds again to think. I'll say something else too. Sometimes when people do the thinking part of the Think, Pair, Share, they have a worksheet for their students to write their answer down. So depending on your class, you could try that as well. Okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so I talked to some really interesting students. Some of them are TAs now. Some of them want to be TAs. Some of them want free lunch. So thank you all for sharing. And I appreciate you participating in these activities. So could I hear from 2 groups before we move on? I'm just curious. 2 new people, preferably.
Asking me because I don't have time to read all of them.
Okay, cool. All right, let's clap for him. Thank you. What class do you TA for? I'm just curious.
Human resource management.
Okay, sure.
Service marketing.
So you have a lot of experience. That's good. Yeah. Okay, I mean, he makes a good point. Just logistically, if you're teaching a giant class, well, you said 60 students, I think it is very difficult, no matter how good of a teacher they are, just one person to manage that. Yeah, super good point. If you can make that easier for everybody, that's awesome. And being the person in between as well is great. Okay, cool. So that's an example of TPS. Thank you all for participating in that. When it comes to that sort of discussion-based class, I know NTUST is, it's a science and technology school, so sometimes it can be a little more difficult to incorporate discussion into the classroom. I do think it's possible, and for that, you need to think about what sort of questions you're asking. So I do see often, especially in EMI classes, where the questions being asked are very open-ended. If you ask a student an open-ended question, if they're very confident with the material or with their language ability or with both, then it's no problem. They can answer very, very clearly, very easily. But sometimes it's a lot more effective and you get better answers and better thinking from the students if the questions you're asking are more targeted, more directed, okay? So to demonstrate that, a very easy example would be the difference between asking, okay, everyone, do you understand? Yeah, the answer to that question is yes or no, okay? And it doesn't really tell me anything. But if I said, okay, everyone, what are 2 concepts we learned today? That's actually a huge difference because when you answer that, I can actually see what you've gathered. And if you can't answer that question, then I know, okay, no, they don't understand. And depending on how you answer it too, I can, it's just a lot more useful to you as a teacher and to the students. Another example, asking a more open-ended question, or really this is more like a memory question. What is classroom management? I told you a definition at the beginning of the class. If you wrote that in your notes or if you remembered that, you could just answer that directly. I know that you have listened, which is useful, and I know that you're taking notes, I guess, which is useful, but ultimately it's better to do something beyond memory. I think that's kind of the base, is that everyone's listening and following that. So a more effective question is, how would a TA do classroom management in class? You take the knowledge that you've taught and you do sort of a more application-based thing out of it, okay? So not just memory. And lastly, my last example, what do you know about testing? You could answer this in a million ways, okay? In fact, I would say there is no correct answer for this question. But if I asked you, can you give 2 examples of how testing can track learning? Again, you're applying knowledge that you have to the specific context, which in this case is EMI, how to be a TA. It's just so much more useful. And this is about being specific, okay? So to review, you want to have a clear learning objective. You're not just testing their memory. You want to have application of memory, application of knowledge. And you want to be specific and unambiguous. You don't want them guessing as to what you want to hear. You want them to know exactly what they're supposed to say. That's a big part of classroom management. No guessing. Okay, so I know I've been speaking a lot. We have one final activity before we finish. I want you all to practice making discussion questions for your classes. So you can imagine these questions as being for Think, Pair, Share. So you can build them as if it will be exactly the activity that we just did, okay? So the students will be in class, they'll think first, then they'll talk with a partner, and then they'll share with the class, okay? I have a few examples. These are really, really basic, but just if you're lost, to give you an idea. Let's say you're teaching, let's say you're teaching a history class, okay? And the topic for that semester is World War II. So what are two causes for the war between Russia and Japan? As an example, okay? It's specific, it's unambiguous, and it asks for application. Another example would be, imagine you're teaching a biology class and you're talking about cell structure. What would happen to a plant cell if its vacuole were damaged? Explain your answer. So you don't need to make your questions very difficult. In fact, maybe the simpler the better, but make sure it's following those three rules, okay? Clear learning objective, unambiguous, and not just memory, application. All right. To do this, we're going to use this Google form. So sorry, again, please scan this. Thank you. The place to write your answer will be in there, okay? So I'll wait for everyone to scan that. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you 5 minutes for this. Again, it doesn't need to be a hard question. This is more like a review. Actually, do this. Okay. I'm hopeful that most of you are done, hopefully. Yes, no, maybe? Okay. All right. So that's all I have for today. Before I finish, though, I would love if anybody is willing to share the questions that they wrote. It could be a big help to your classmates. Anybody? Okay. $2 million. I'll do it. Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. So which class are you?
Social well-being.
Okay, cool. Here.
One of the class from digital learning and education. I have classmates here looking at me right now. All right. So one of the questions that I will mention to my student is how do the social well-being and individual well-being will have impact on each other and why?
Okay. And how did you come up with that question?
This was actually the question that I mentioned to my student last week.
Oh, wow.
We were discussing the differences between those two, and we were reading papers reading assessments for the social well-beings and also individual well-beings, and we were having discussions on that. So I would like to have more insights from the students' sides. That's why I mentioned this question to my students.
Okay, awesome. Can we clap for her, please? Thank you so much. I love that you actually use that. That's so cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that's a really great question. Before we wrap up, anybody else? One more person? Practice your English speaking? No? Okay, so that's not only, obviously they have to understand the concept to answer that question, but it's application as well beyond that. I would fail your class for sure. Okay, cool. So thank you all for participating. If you keep a hold of those questions, you could actually use them in your class, and I hope that you do. And that's what these two have done, so that's awesome. Okay, before we finish, again, I just want to share, this is the information of our office. We're actually in the IB building, the 10th floor. It's me and Anita there. So again, if you ever want to have like one-on-one English work, whether that be for a test, for your classes, or just conversation, you can come find us. And we also teach a lot of workshops like this. So we are always happy to have new students, new faces. And there's a lot of you here that are our students. So thank you for coming. Okay, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.